Veteran Voice. My name is Larry McCullaugh. I'll be your host for the show today. We're fortunate enough to have a couple of Korean veterans with us today. On your left is Jerry Conver. Jerry, I know, is a past trustee of the VFW, and we've worked on several funeral details together, and very active in the veteran community. And Jerry is a Korean veteran, and he's here to share some of his experiences with us today. Jerry, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Larry.
It's good to be here.
Glad to be here.
Well, it's certainly good to have you. On the right is Russel Kingston, and if he looks familiar, that's because Russell has been a guest here before, and he did another program with us. Russell's a Korean veteran who was taken prisoner of war and has shared some of his experiences with us, and he's come back to share some more with us. So, Russell, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
It was good to have both of you. We probably ought to start the way that we usually do it. Is let me ask you, Jerry, how when you got involved in the service, how did you get into the military, and what branch were you in, and what was your primary occupation or MOS when you got in?
Well, I got drafted in 1951, September, and it's a very, very interesting start to your career. We left Paducah to go to Owensboro, where we were inducted, and then we got on a train and went to Fort Meade, Maryland. Stayed there a couple of days, and then we got on the train again and went back up. I woke up a time or two, and I think we were in Pennsylvania. And then we came back down through Ohio to Louisville, and got on a bus and went to Fort Knox, which was practically where we started. That took several days. But I did my basic training at Fort Knox in I think it was a 502nd Armored Reconnaissance. When we finished basic training, why several of us, you got your little group, we decided, well, they're sending everybody to Korea, so we're going to go to leadership school. That was another 2 or 3 weeks. So we went to leadership school. While we were doing that, we decided, well, let's take the OCS training. So we took the test and filled out all the papers and everything, and then we find out that we go through leadership school and hang around another couple of weeks and decide we're going to back out because we got 2 more years active duty after you get your commission from OCS. So after we backed out, it was the next weekend after leave. We came back and we knew where we were going because we had notices on the bulletin board to go get our shots. So, which we did in about a week, and got about a week or two's leave and reported to Camp Stoneman, California, which we waited for a week or two in a holding company out there. Got on a ship, and several weeks later ended up in Incheon, in Yokohama in Japan. Then we get on another boat and go to Incheon. And we get off the boat there. I was assigned to the 45th, it was the 245th Tank Company. And we were immediately put in trucks and sent to the front lines at that time. So my first night was in a tank with some people I just met in a holding position, standing guard duty. So there I am with the 45th, 245th Tank Company.
So did you stay in armor pretty much the entire time you were there?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a pretty safe place after a period of time.
Yeah. At least you got something to hide behind when you're in a tank.
Exactly.
Russell, I think you've shared with us before, but tell us how you got into the military.
Well, I went and joined the Army, and they sent me to Owensboro, I guess the same place you did.
Yeah, probably.
It was inducted, sworn in and all. And then we stayed in Owensboro one night. And we were sent from there to Fort Knox. And I stayed there 16 or 18 weeks, taking my training, and then come home for 18 days and went to Seattle, Washington. Stayed there overnight, I guess, part of the next day, and then got on a plane and flew to Tokyo, Japan. I was there the rest of that day and part of the next morning, and they put us on trains and sent us down to Yokohama, Japan, where he was at. And then from there, we got on a ship and went to Busan.
So-
then after I got in Busan, why, we was all in a line, and when we went off of the ship, they had all kinds of ammunition. They said, take what ammunition you want and look at your enemy. And they was in between them railroad tracks, just as far as you could see was North Korean soldiers, you know.
Oh man.
And me and another guy, that was going to the same outfit I did, which is the 1st Cavalry, we hitchhiked 4 or 5 days and finally got up to our outfit. Then from there on there's history.
Yeah. Well, I just happened to think of something when you mentioned that. So you guys both took your basic at Fort Knox.
Yeah, I did.
And as did I in 1970.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys remember Agony and Misery, the hills that were
Oh,
there.
yeah.
You know where Agony was? At the top of Agony, back. That's where my
right?
backs was.
I used to tell people that Fort Knox is the only place I've been in the world where you can go on a 10-mile march, walk what seems like uphill the whole way, and still end up right back where you started.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do that, but it just it seems like you're going a long way uphill, and how do you get back where you started without ever going down? I don't know how they do it, but Fort Knox is unique in that way.
Uphill.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, tell us after you got to Korea. I'm sure you've got some interesting stories that stand out in your mind. Go ahead and share a few of them with us.
Well,
Share a
I
couple.
don't really have a lot. I guess I was fortunate from the fact that the hard fighting that I was involved in was pretty soon after I got there. The 45th was, I guess they got there in December of '51, and had been there a while. Now, this is the Oklahoma National Guard. They were called up with the 40th, which is the California National Guard. They put the whole division, equipment, trucks, and everything on ships and sent them to relieve the 1st Cav it was almost in '52. And but anyway, at that time they were already into the early parts of the peace talk thing, and the big thing was they were trying to sort of straighten out the lines, get the high ground, and do this, that, and the other. And the 45th had some pretty good little fights around Old Baldy and that area in the Cherwan Valley. We did a whole lot of just tanks of artillery support with our little pea shooter we had on our World War II Sherman tank. They called it souped up because it was a 75. It started out to be in World War II? It wasn't much of a gun. And the Chinese and the North Koreans had Russian tanks with 80 millimeter cannons on them. So if we ran on one of those, we sort of tried to scoot out of the way, because you don't miss very often when you shoot a tank round.
So you were slightly outgunned a little bit.
We were outgunned terribly, but there were some areas in the Cherwan Valley where we could. The ground was flat enough where we could move around reasonably well. We had a couple of pretty good little skirmishes, trying to get the hills back. They'd have it, we'd have it, they'd have it. This went on for quite a spell. The 45th started, we were actually the first replacements that they had after being there the few months that they had been there. And we got pulled off after the division got shot up pretty good, and they pulled us back in Army Reserve. And being in armor, we didn't stay long. We were usually sent to support a infantry company, maybe in one of the 3 regiments of the 45th, or just wherever they wanted to send us. And after that, we got out of Army Reserve. We were sent to an area way over on the East Coast. Matter of fact, we were real mountainous there, and they sent a lot of times. They would send the tanks. They'd move them on those narrow gauge railroads if they happened to have a railroad. And I recall one time we all loaded up and took off with about 12 tanks and got about halfway up a hill, and he couldn't go any further, so he had to back all the way back miles to take a couple of tanks off so he could get over the hill.
So sometimes you just had to adapt to whatever was the terrain was.
Yeah, and then most of the time in that area over there, we just basically dug in and furnished support, on targets here or there. We were in that area. The lines were very close. They were close enough with binoculars you could see people walking up and down the trenches, And we stayed there quite a while. We had a few little good experiences there. After I'd been near time to come home, I think it was a captain. I'd run into a captain with one of the company commanders with one of the divisions. One of the companies we were with. And he wanted to move the kitchen up on the hill. And usually you got the MLR and then back down behind the hill and on down's where the cooks, and they fix food and put them in those cans and brought them up the hill to feed. Well, this guy's got the big idea. He wants to move the kitchen up. So I got to be the construction superintendent to build this big bunker, this kitchen bunker. And he got me whatever I wanted. I'd just get truckloads of logs and sandbags and 20 gosh, I can't remember what they called them now, but they were South Koreans, older ones that were construction. They worked on the roads and did this and did that. But we built a huge bunker up there where the cooks could come up, built them a kitchen, built a mess hall. This thing was for that part of the country, it was a mansion. And I'm sure there's some of the locals had them a nice place to live after we left.
Well, Russell, now, I think we know that you became a prisoner of war. When you first got there, is there any experiences that stand out in your mind before you were taken prisoner, as far as just any incidents that happened, whether they be combat or friendly or
I was
humorous or whatever?
My outfit was K Company, 1st Cavalry. It was heavy weapons, and we was attached to a tank division. It might have been his division, I don't know. But anyway, tanks are no good unless you got infantry supporting it. And they would take us as far as they could, and then when we hit the hills, we had no support, from the tanks, Then we got into this valley where we dug in before we was captured. They blowed the bridges up, and our tanks couldn't retreat back. And a few of them went down the riverbank into the river, thought, they could go, get marred down.
Didn't work out, huh? Oh, gosh. That had to be a desperate situation when you've advanced to a certain point and you realize that all of a sudden you're way too...
You were surrounded. There wasn't too much you could do.
Mm-hmm. So you were there, and that's where you were going to be for a while.
That's right.
Well, Jerry, you mentioned that you had some National Guard and Reserve troops, and I didn't know that they'd done that. Were there a lot of National Guard and Reserve troops that had been activated during Korea?
I think there were 4 divisions, and 2, California and Oklahoma, got called up to active duty.
Really?
The other 2 didn't. We didn't have much of an army back in those days. By the time the war was trying to end, there was about 8 divisions, I think, active. But of course, the early stages, they had everybody online they could get online, the cooks and MPs and whatever truck drivers and whatever you could have, because they just didn't have anybody to fight. That was before, like I said, that was lucky before I got there. I didn't go through that, Benz. I didn't get there till early '52. We had seemed to have, it's hard. You're so scattered and trying to bring all that back. We seemed to have pretty much everything we needed, except there were just so many Chinese, and they just overrun places, and also the Rock Army had a few divisions up there, and every time they'd get hit hard, they'd run.
They wasn't any good.
We had to run them back up the hill.
So when you refer to the rock, that's like
Republic of Korea.
Okay, so those were the South Korean soldiers.
Right.
RKOs.
Right.
Okay, I see. Okay.
And the division, after I'd been there some time, this was later in my year's time, started integrating them into the infantry platoons and squads, maybe 2 or 3 Koreans per squad. And they were about as worthless there as they were by themselves. One of our tricks we used to do is when we'd be on guard almost every night, you'd have to split up and stand guard. Well, then you walk down the trenches, you walk by there and he's sitting there asleep. So we decided how we'd solve that. We'd give him a hand grenade and take the pin out. So they'd sit there, and when they'd go to sleep, of course that handle pops off that grenade, and the fuse, you got 10 seconds to do something with it. So occasionally you'd hear a muffled, they'd run and throw a hand grenade in the bunker.
So the ones that were sleeping on guard duty
pretty well got caught.
Okay.
We had all kinds of little things to try to keep it going. So much of it after we got out of Cherwan, Old Baldy, out of that area, and it was sort of boring at times. The weather was, the snow was shoulder high and this, that, and the other. But we had times to invent things, I guess, like any good American GI would do. Another little trick we learned was, of course, in wintertime we were having to start those tanks every few hours to keep them from getting frost over. And we found out that the cooks would go back to battalion to get the food for the day early in the morning, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. So we sort of spotted where all this was going on. And, of course, the cooks would have one on duty, and then they had 3 or 4 Koreans doing the labor and washing dishes and doing stuff, calling their groceries. And so we found out where they was unloading the trailer. The Jeep would go, and it had these little trailers, and all the food would be in there, so we got to watching. And the Koreans would come down to pack the stuff back to where the tents were, back in the little draws. And so we'd go help ourselves we just borrowed it, to cans of bacon. It had those gallon cans of bacon and jelly and peanut butter and all that good stuff. So we helped ourselves to.
Pay it back?
No, not yet. They may have now. I told them to before I left.
I saw that coming because we did the same thing.
Did you?
Yeah. We got into the monsoon season, and we knew if we had to walk a mile down to the mess hall, we were just going to be eating water buffalo, being told it was roast beef. So we requisitioned a skid of sea rats, brought those back. And, if you can split those up and divide them and stuff, you can make a decent meal if you got something to heat them up with, and a little ketchup and hot sauce and
cheese.
Yeah, we knew, in an air cab unit we couldn't fly, but I guess everybody at one time or another has figured out a way to requisition a little bit of extra food.
Bar a little and a fresh loaf of bread every now and then.
Right.
Well, the Chinese were brave.
Oh yeah, they'd just come through the lines.
They come through in that perimeter we had dug for the sick and wounded before they told us to retreat. They started at the river digging a trench, and they would zigzag it, keep you from shooting down the trench at them. And a lot of times I'd shoot at the shovel when they'd come out with a load of dirt on the shovel. Just for kicks, I'd shoot at the shovel.
At least get the fire off a few rounds.
I couldn't hit him. I couldn't even see his head, but I would shoot at the shovel.
I think you might get lucky and get a ricochet.
And then,
You never know.
The first night that we was in that perimeter, well, our supply truck was right out from us. Well, some GI'd say, well, I'm going to get water. And he'd go over. I remember one evening he come by. We was pinned down for about 5 days there. He come by, he went over and got water, and the Chinese were shooting, but they wasn't shooting at him, I don't guess. They were filling that 5-gallon can full of holes, you know.
So it wouldn't, so no
Where
water.
he wouldn't get down. And when he come by my foxhole where I was, he just set one of them down, and the bullets was that close to the bottom of it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And there one night, the North Koreans and the Chinese, they had old cows, and they would, you could see them walking. We set the truck afire, you know, to burn it up, and you could see them walking along beside the old cow. You could see their feet under the cow.
Really?
Yeah, and then the guys shot
Walking
the old
behind
cow. They shot the old cows, you know, before they could get to the Chinese. You know.
Chinese were pretty
They're pretty shrewd.
shrewd, huh?
Yeah.
Now, did you was much of your contact with North Koreans, or was most of it seemed to be
Most of mine was with Chinese.
Well,
Then after we was captured, why, in the spring of '51, we had an old English-speaking Chinese. He was real old, and he was, he's communist, you know, communism, and he would give lectures, you know. And they had give us some old padded uniforms, and I had smoked a little bit and burnt holes in mine, you know. And when we go to the lectures, well, I just pull cotton out, you know, and I'd stick it in there. You know.
so you didn't really care to hear what he had
No,
to say,
and
huh?
there'd be a Chinese come by, making sure you wasn't sitting there asleep. You'd listen to the lecture. He'd see that cotton. He'd jerk that cotton out and make me go up there and sit by the old company commander was giving the lecture. I had sat up there the whole time, you know.
You got in time out.
Yeah.
So, in other words, you weren't the greatest student while you were a prisoner.
No, they tried to turn. They tried to turn you, you know,
Would they?
starve you out is what they did. Because after we was there, the first spring of the year, they taken everybody's clothes because they was afraid everybody would escape, you know. And they took our clothes, but they finally got us some old blues back, you know.
So everybody pretty much wore the same type
Yeah.
of uniform. So,
And if you get in the camp, there's several hundred of us in there. And I remember one night, real dark and quiet, you know, and some guy from over in the camp, you know, he hollered out, "Here comes the cry of the Mohigi." Well, that Chinese didn't know what that was, you know. And up yonder in another company, he would say, "He's coming down the creek bed." Just old stuff like that.
Yeah.
And boy, they would go to blowing the sirens and call out all their guards, you know. They was thinking we was going to make a break, you know.
Oh, so that was kind of your
Oh,
way
we
to
did
kinda
that. We
mess
did
with
that.
them a little bit, huh?
We did that all the time.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
The little bitty victories
Yeah.
like that probably meant a lot, though, didn't they? I mean, considering the circumstances under which you were being held.
I went, I had dysentery, and I went out on the point to the bathroom and come back. It was just about daylight. And there was foggy, and there's a Korean boat pulling in with supplies. And somebody hollered, "What's on the boat?" And I just kept a walking, and I hollered, "Rolled oats." I don't know why I hollered rolled oats, but it was wood. to cook with, you know. And man, that whole camp just swarmed that lake down there to get rhodos.
Oh,
And,
man.
Yeah, and they made them all get the wood and catch, you know. And I was sitting there on my little old porch when they come by, and one of them said, I wish I could find that SOB that hollered roll over.
You didn't volunteer to let
No,
him
I
know we
didn't,
did that. No.
I didn't volunteer to tell him it was me, you know.
Yeah.
And then another one come in down there one morning, and I seen this guy leaving. I asked him about what's on the boat. He said, soybeans. And we take them soybeans and put them in a mess kit
Right.
and parch them. They're just like peanuts.
Good food.
Yeah, well, me and a
Really?
buddy of mine went down there and we tied our pant legs and just filled them full, you know, up what my pant was up, you know. And we started back up the trail, and there's a guy in front of us. We had to go right by the guard, you know. And as he went by the guard, one of his strings come loose, and he just scattered peas everywhere. You know?
Oh, man.
Well, when he did, he caught me and my buddy too. See, so he took us over to what they call ration breakdown, and they put my foot over in a tub and cut the string. You know, said we had enough peas to feed 140 men.
Get them soybeans.
Oh, man.
And then they throwed me in a stockade, and my buddy, they put him out there. It was close to a Turk company, and they put him out there sawing wood with the Turks.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy. So when you got caught doing something, there
Oh,
were
when you
definitely
got
going to
caught,
be
you,
ramifications for.
They punished you for it.
But that meant that you just had to figure out new and different ways to
Yeah.
to fool them into what's going
Yeah.
on. I'll tell you, fellas, we're approaching the end of the first half hour, and just like the last time you were here, the time just flies
Yeah.
when you guys get to talking. But if y'all haven't got any other plans, why don't we take a little short break here? Let the people at home watch a little infomercial, run to the kitchen and get a soft drink and
Okay.
a cold piece of pizza or whatever they're going to do. And we'll come back and spend a little bit more time talking. We can talk about maybe towards the middle and end of your tours, what it was like when you came back. And I know you've got some information, Jerry, about how you've made an attempt to go into the schools and talk to the history classes, and without much success. And I think that that's something that maybe we need to work on with the Korean being known as the Forgotten War. I do think that we need to maybe see if we can't, how shall I put this, spur a little interest from some of the teachers and maybe the superintendents and school board to try to educate these young people, especially since we're in a war now, and let them know where everything led up to now. So y'all just kind of sit tight for a second here, and y'all at home go home and get a soft drink or a piece of pizza, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
It starts in your own neighborhood. When you care enough to give your time to help someone still learning the way and getting involved in the needs of your community.
Once you've helped bring a smile to someone's face
and help brighten their day,
you'll be hooked for life.
The Major League Baseball Players Trust and Volunteers of America are teaming up to make a real difference in the lives of the people in our communities. No matter who you are or where you live, Volunteers of America believes there are no limits to caring. Join a winning team. See what you can do to help. Call 800-899-0089 or visit volunteersofamerica.org.
For me, it's giving the best of myself.
For me, it's the professional team environment and the mutual respect that I share with my colleagues.
For me, it's providing my patients with the best and safest care possible.
For me, it's having the latest in healthcare technologies.
For me, it's the reward that comes from caring for America's veterans. We are the nurses of VA.
For all of us, It's the pride of working in a supportive professional environment.
With great benefits and opportunities for career advancement.
And the privilege of providing the best health care to America's veterans.
VA Nursing, a career in caring. Go to vacareers.com for more information.
Welcome back to Veteran Voice. We're talking with our guests today, Jerry Conver and Russel Kingston. And that first half hour just flew by. And while we were taking the break, Jerry, you were relating a story to me that you've got to share with the viewers here. Go ahead and if you wouldn't mind, repeat that story you just told me.
The deuce and a half, or the well, I'll do both of them real quick. When we move the tanks, why? You operated them with laterals to lock the tracks to make it go one way or the other. And so if a road had any crown in it at all, when you're moving down the road, you're always having to pull that lateral because you want to drift off to the right. And many times we'd be going down a road and here'd come a South Korean truck with about 50 people on it wanting to play a little road chicken, so we never did. We'd be right in the center, and many times they'd go off through a field and they'd be flying everywhere, all around. And then we had we had about 22 or 24 tanks, I think, in the company. And the company would move. They'd always come down with marching orders and set the time you were going to go and the speed, 10 miles an hour or whatever. And the lead was always a Jeep with an officer in it, a lieutenant or a captain. And he'd take off leading the parade. Well, the first tank would always start getting up just a little bit closer. Well, he'd go a little bit faster. Well, finally, everybody's going wide open, just fast as they can go. And we had this one place where we had to make a left-hand 90-degree turn. And of course, going a little bit faster than we should. Why, when you got to that thing, you had to really grab that lateral and lock the track. And of course, that caused that other one just to start digging. Well, the time you got down to about the 12th or 15th tank, you moved that road over considerably, and went through this one place. There's a few mud huts, just little buildings in there. And first thing you know, you'd be knocking posts off the porch, and then you'd be in the front room and just keep going back in there and stuff flying. And of course, the inhabitants out shaking their fists. But that's just part of war.
Well, tank is not exactly a precision vehicle.
No.
I would think the people in a deuce and a half that were driving the trucks probably got instruction. Number one is don't play chicken with a tank.
No,
not a good idea.
Because we're not going to move.
No, Russell, you were getting ready to relay a story.
Well, it was me and my buddy. We was on, I guess you call it tank guard. We was on a dead-end street where the tanks had to go one way or the other, and they would come in, and we had the flares, and we would motion, for them to go that way. And I guess they were playing chicken with us because they got to getting closer and closer, and we would get scared, and we was as far back as we could get on the house. So we just moved out and just let them take it. And it's like he said, it wasn't long until they was taking part of the building with them,
No kidding.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just something about armor that you have to put up with and deal with.
Yeah.
Of course, now I would bet that if there was not a house there and it was more like a cliff, I'll bet those guys could probably get a little bit better control.
I'll tell you about my guard duty in Pyongyang, capital of North Korea. Me and a buddy of mine was pulling guard duty, and my first sergeant told me, said, Kingston, said, shave and get ready. Said, we're going to see Bob Hope. And I said, I just come out and told him, I said, "Are you pregnant?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, I'm not going to see Bob Hope." He said, "Well, if you don't go see Bob Hope, you go back over and relieve that guy on guard." I said, "Where I was?" He said, "Yeah, same place." Well, here come my best buddy over there. He didn't go see Bob Hope either. So we had these two little Korean boys, and they would pull us on bicycles. We had to go a block each way, and they'd pull us just fast enough to hold us up. And we'd go, the guard. And when we took the town, a tank or a small arm fire or something killed a cow. And this old Korean, he had the old cow dressed out. She was on the ground. And he would cut off a hunk of meat. The man would come up and pay him for it. What he could buy is no more money than he had. It's what he would buy, And this one old guy come in there, and he just looked like he's real poor. He just bought a little old piece about like your fist or a little bigger, And this other one come in, had the big tall hat on.
Yeah.
The big tall hat.
Right.
He come in, He come in and he bought a pretty good size hunk of meat. Boy, he pulled out enough money to choke a bull. And my buddy said, "Watch this." So he walked up to him and throwed his carbine in this old Korean's belly, And he just throwed a fit. Old Riddle, he just kept pushing it, So finally he give him his money. And when he did, he hollered at that other old Korean that bought that little dab, And he come back and he bought a big old hunk of meat that big.
Another piece.
And he just bow,
That guy, it was that fella's lucky day, wasn't it?
No. He said, I don't want to know what it's called. He robbed from one to help the other,
I think that's something that we all take for granted that you fellows I know experienced in Korea is the fact that we do have it really good in this country. As far as having, grocery stores, I would imagine that people from the villages, if they ever saw a grocery store here in the United States and all the food and the lights and how clean and the fresh meat behind the thing, just wouldn't know how to act.
Well, they'd take us from that camp we was in. We had to go out on detail and carry rock to build a theater. And if the rock wasn't big enough, well, those Koreans would shove it off of your shoulder and point down and make you pick up one that was a lot bigger. So most of us would go down in that creek bed and we'd find one that was flat, pretty good sized rock. And we'd come back through town, and those Chinese got little feet. And they'd have their tennis shoes washed, and we had to go pretty close to a board fence, and they'd have them shoes up on them board feet, on that fence,
Yeah.
And a guy would grab one. He wouldn't have time to grab two. He'd just grab one and throw it under his coat, And next morning, while you'd hear him holler out, "I got one right," or "I got one left."
Trying to make a pair.
And then another guy over in the camp said, "I got it right."
So everybody
they would meet and see who got the shoes.
And eventually you just held on as long as I can get a shoe now, and then everybody ended up with shoes.
Yeah.
And then if they knew you had shoes, would they take them away from you, or did they? So.
And they before I was released over there, I knew I was coming home, but the sick and wounded and all had to go first, so they would march us into town and show us Russian movies. We'd go in town one night, maybe the next night another company would go.
The whole brainwashing trick.
Yeah, right. They showed us Russian, the 10-year plan. You remember they had a 10-year plan.
Mm.
They showed us the one, the white-haired daughter. It was pretty good.
But Larry, you made a point a minute ago, about what we do have in this country, and the sad thing about, I guess, any war, and I'm sure you had the same situation where you were, is the little orphan kids that there's thousands of them, where the whole family, you know, through bombing or artillery or whatever, the whole family gets killed, and then you've got these starving to death.
Yeah.
I've seen them take a tin can, and if around one of our mess halls where we'd go eat, and of course after you get through, you go dump your tray in a big 50-gallon garbage can and pour your coffee in there, and it's all mixed up bunk of soup, and they just go in there and dip cans full of that stuff out and eat it to keep them starving to death. And fight it if you get that old hard World War II candy, and we'd throw it out to those kids, and it's just it's pitiful. It's
Well,
just,
in
it's really
Tucson,
pitiful.
don't them little old orphans?
Yeah.
There was one there when we got off of the boat, and he had both legs off, and he had looked like Kirkcone brushes, you know, and he had walked on his hands, you know, and he was shining shoes.
Really?
You know, he didn't have nothing to shine them with, an old rag and an old brush, you know, and you give him something to eat. And I noticed there, this one GI opened him a can of cherries and handed them to him. And the little old kid, I guess, was 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
He took his fingers, you know, and he ate that. It was a big can. He ate that whole can of cherries.
Yeah, that's something about Vietnam and Korea, I think, that we're very, very similar. Is it seems like the true victims over there were the citizens or the farmers or the population, because they're going to have to buddy up with whoever's controlling the territory at that time, you know, whether it be North Korea or the Americans, because for them, I'm sure it was like in Vietnam, the farmers out there, they don't care what the politics of the country are.
They can't even
speak
English.
Yeah, and the children, they're
the ones that suffer.
Yeah, they want to grow some food and exist, and they could give a darn less who's calling the shots, but they're always the one that seem to be stuck in the middle, and that's the really sad part, especially the children, like you say.
You know, it's difficult to believe in 1950s that you see people out with an oxen pulling a cart with wooden wheels, and the family would walk in line. The old Papa son would be up front, and then Mama son, and the kids of the age, and the little guys in the back. You know, he's hustling to try to keep up. But I saw 3 of them working one shovel one time in a rice paddy. They were trying to patch a dike, and they had 2 up on top with the ropes tied down to the blade of the shovel almost. And the guy in the bottom, he would get a chunk of dirt, and they were swinging. They had a rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I seen them do that with
filling
water.
it's just amazing.
I saw them do that in Vietnam also.
And even in a smaller country as that was, they had different dialects in different parts of the country. And if they took a farmer out here and went to Seoul, he couldn't even speak the English hardly. You know, they couldn't communicate even.
They said there's 450 dialects.
It's
really?
Yeah.
Just in
Korea.
In the peninsula of Korea?
You know, they made their own shoes.
Well, they made everything.
Yeah, they would
guess.
take elm or whatever, you know, and bend it to fit their foot and weave the bottom. They made their own shoes.
It's amazing. And we all understand that North Korea still to this day, the people are starving up there, and the military looks, they got nice uniforms, and they're building their weapons up, but the poor people out in the countryside are, as I understand, there's not even any grass left to eat. Yeah, I mean,
it don't look good in North Korea now.
No, it really doesn't. And I don't know the answer, but I know that something's going to have to give pretty soon.
They're going to turn it over to the UN.
Oh, I won't touch that.
No.
Because I know I'll irritate somebody, so I'll just pass on that.
We won't have to go to war, will we?
No. The one thing about it, though, it's like the poor old GI, and he was talking about dysentery or whatever, and if you're up on line, they always put the slit trench on the highest part of the hill, so you won't stay there very long.
That's why they did. All right, now I'm understanding.
Yeah, the mortars can come in a whole lot easier that way.
Oh gosh. Well, let me ask both of you, as as you approach the end of your tour, I was like you said, I know that you heard about the peace talks that were going on, and I don't know a lot about it, but I know in Vietnam that they went back and they argued for 2 years over the shape of the table.
Right.
As it started getting closer to the end of the war in Korea, did you have any idea that it was getting closer to the end, or
I did.
Did you?
They started feeding us better.
Really?
Yeah.
In the
Because
POW camp.
they didn't want you to leave, looking like a skeleton.
Oh.
And, they fed a lot better than they did.
And did they talk about the fact that you'd be going home soon?
Yeah. I would ask them when I was coming home, and they always told me, said, when the time comes. And they would take us up and give us that lecture, and that old Chinese would tell us how many hundreds of thousands of GIs that was killed, and how many tanks was knocked out, and how many planes was knocked out. We didn't have that many in Korea. As many as they would say,
They were still feeding that propaganda.
And they was, on the peace talks, it was always the Americans' fault. It never was the Chinese. It caused them the peace talks to break down.
Well, boy, speaking of that, there's one thing that I guess people don't realize is we had total command of the skies.
Mm-hmm.
And the flights they brought in there, like I said, I was in the mountainous, hilly part of the country most of the time. But those 4 planes would come. One would stay up there and circle, and the other 3 would come down and shoot what ammunition he had, I guess his machine guns and everything. Then they'd drop their napalm on those trenches, and you could just see it running. Boy, they're vicious. And those guys were good. I mean, they flew right down to where you could reach up and slap them.
Oh, yeah.
They flew them on the ground. And that was of course, we had, the Navy participated in everything, but it wasn't just the GIs over there. It was the Air Force did a whole lot of work. Matter of fact, we were over when I was talking about us going over in the East Coast in the mountains. We were up there one day, and we got word down from the headquarters, and they say, find the deepest hole you can get in. The Missouri's going to fire on this hill down. They had a record player down there, and they'd play all these Christmas songs and all that crap, from morale. And we tried to do everything we could to it and couldn't get it. I guess we could have gone taking it, but they just knocked us right off of it because it was right at the bottom of the hill. And if you've never heard one of them battleship rounds coming at you, you ain't heard nothing. You hadn't heard a freight train or anything else.
Really?
All their mean.
You got a unique sound to it, huh?
Wow.
and we had a little bit of naval gunfire that we used in Vietnam. And the thing that I noticed is that for as far away as they were amazingly accurate.
Oh, right on it.
I could never figure out how they could be so far away
and rocking up and down.
Yeah, and still be able to put because I'd be like getting a little bit scared. It's like I hope that guy's
over in Korea. They'd shoot. They called them lob-lolly shells.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, that's some short rounds. That old World War II crap, and the ammunition.
You never know where it was going to go.
Good.
A lob-lolly round will be whistling.
They go.
And you don't know. Somebody will duck your head because it could be on you or it could be anywhere.
Also, it was like was it a defect in the powder that they were firing?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, they called it a lob-lolly.
Oh, and they probably knew as soon as the thing went. You could tell by the sound of it
that
something was wrong.
You knew it was a short round.
And it was just you never knew where that was going to end up at.
Mm-hmm.
If you heard one, it's too late.
That's not a good thing. Well, go ahead.
We had another place over there. You might enjoy this little quick story, but we were close enough with a pair of field glasses we could see the Chinese walking up and down the trench, just the top part of them. So we took our 50 caliber machine gun and mounted it on the thing and packed it down real good with sandbags so it wouldn't move. And they've got those dials on them, how you can move them around and lock them down. Mm-hmm. Well, we got her in there and we locked her down real good, and we had it where it'd shoot right over the ridge of that trench. And then we had to start shooting before they start getting there. So we had to learn how to lead them. And we'd get one every now and then. It wasn't
Really?
very occasionally.
With a 50 cal?
Yeah, a half a mile away or a mile away or whatever it was. I don't know what the distance was, but we had our arch right in there and tied down where and then we'd see them when we'd see one coming. You wanted to forget, but that's.
Well, I know that normally 50 cal was like an it wasn't meant for anti-personnel. I can only imagine what it probably hit somebody with that. They exploded, I would
close,
think.
yeah.
It's a big slug of lead.
Oh, yeah. We had another thing, too, that was really great that helped everybody tremendously. Of course, when you dig in on those hills, and I was at a spot or two where, the Chinese, they'd try to overpower everything, but they had those quad 50s.
Yeah.
The World War II, those for anti-aircraft, quad 50, and they'd dig them in pointing down that hill, and they had them cross-fired in there with all of our machine guns and everything, and couldn't nothing come up that hill. No way, a rat couldn't get up that hill.
When those things started talking, we used to use them for clearing landing zones. They put them on a tank.
Did y'all have them?
Oh, yeah, they had one guy would sit behind it, and they were all synchronized.
Oh,
what
yeah.
We was on the march going up there one day, in one of them quad 50s.
Yeah.
And North Korean sitting on it with his feet on the controls and a finger on each gun, and he would lean over looking through that screen, the sight there they are,
Yeah.
And he was burnt just about that black. A GI was smoking a cigarette. He took it out of his mouth and put it in his.
Yeah, I remember feeling similar to that.
It was ornery, him doing it, but he did it.
When you're in that kind of a
You got to do something, pass time away. I mean, we got another 2 months or another 3 months.
Russell, I noticed that we were looking through the notebook that you got there a while ago. Is there anything in there that you'd like to share?
No,
anything in particular? You got a lot of very interesting articles.
My daughter
in there
fixed
and letters.
this. My daughter fixed this, and this is mostly the mail that my mom received while I was a prisoner of war. And there's none of it that I received. There's telegrams when I was released and this and that and the other. And there's none of it that I received because they wouldn't let me get out with any mail.
So any mail that you did receive, did they let you keep it for a period of time?
Yeah. Well, you could keep it as long as you wanted to.
But when it came time to come back,
it's like that photo album up there.
Mm-hmm.
But I did get out with a list. I think it might be up there. A list of the names of the people that wrote me letters while I was over there.
Now, there was something you pointed out before we started also about the fact that there are a lot of, I don't know if I said, but there are several men that you knew who died in Korea.
Yeah. There's, like I said, right here.
Who were buried there.
Right here. They're buried on this hill and back on this one over here. And there's never been anybody from Washington or anybody go to that part of Korea. They're always going to Unsan, where the 8th Army had their biggest battle in 1950. That's where.
So where they got picked up.
That's where I was hit and everything, And that's where they're still after the remains in Unsan.
And I believe that you said those people that you obviously know they're dead. But
I know they're there
but
because
still
I helped bury them.
But they're still listed as officially as missing in action.
Yeah,
then.
because I guess they're missing in action until you get them back.
We had circumstances like that in Vietnam where we were unable to. There are certain times we just couldn't recover the body. Either that or there just wasn't anything left to.
Now there's a lot of these that I helped bury over there. I didn't know their names because we had nuts there in the camp that when a guy would die, he would jerk his dog tags off and keep both of them. And we didn't know who we buried.
Okay.
I was noticing in that graybeards, they had these figures, I don't know whether they're totally up to date. They had 103,000 wounded in action. This is in Korea. 8,100 missing in action. 54,250 killed in action. 7,000 prisoners of war. And of that 7,000 prisoners, 51% of them died, so they're somewhere around wherever. But those were the latest numbers that we had, and I don't know about the Orientals we got, but it's way more than what I think it was up. Like I heard something like 1 million something. I don't know.
We're getting near the end of the program, but I did want to touch on something that you brought up to me, and that was an effort that you made some time back to go into the schools, which I mentioned earlier.
Yes, I was.
Can you kind of give me a short summary of what happened and why it never seemed to take off?
It came through the VFW, and Mike Penny appointed me as to do what we could do for the July 27, 2003. That was the 50-year anniversary of the peace signing, or not signing, the ceasefire. And I don't know whether it was the VA, I'm not real sure, but they put out a set of teachers' guides. There was, I've got some in the truck, but I didn't bring them down here. Don't know whether we could use them or not. But sometime if you do want to see some of them, I'll be glad to come back and show them to you if they can use them. But these are posters with all the real nice maps, all the details of the war from the time it started till it ended. And I took that series that they sent us and put plexiglass over it so they'd be preserved. Took them to every school in McCracken County, private, public, whatever. And it's a job getting in those schools sometime. And tried to get them to become a member. All you had to do was had the paper filled out and everything, and all they had to do was send it in. And you would get this teaching packet. It had books, CDs, everything in it. And, for a civics class or a history class or whatever. And like I said, I personally found the person to go to, went to every school. I may not have found the person in 1 or 2 out of 20. But as far as I know, I didn't hear a thing from any of them. The only one I think that might have sent that in was the lady down at the library, who, by the way, is a very nice person. Anyway, I was just disappointed that we didn't hear anything at all from it, because another generation is going to be gone.
Yeah, well, and that's, everyone refers to the Korean as the forgotten war, and you guys are the forgotten warriors. So I'm really glad that you guys came on the program and shared your experiences with us. Maybe this will generate a little bit of interest. Maybe there's a young person out there who might see this and maybe approach his teacher and say, maybe they'd like to know more about the Korean War. And I know that you guys would be willing. I know you would, and probably you, Russell, would be willing to go in and talk to the classes.
Yeah.
But I want to thank both of you fellows for coming and sharing your experiences with us today. It's very interesting. And like I said, the time just flies when I get with you guys. But I want to thank Russell Kingston. I want to, we don't do too many funeral details anymore, but Jerry, I'm glad you came on to see us all, and I want to thank the viewing audience for being with us today, and we hope that you'll join us next time on Veteran Voice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.